The age at which this occurred was 23. I've been thinking about this vacation every single day since I turned 27. We were planning to take our friend Andrew to Las Vegas to celebrate his 21st birthday. We knew he hadn't done the deed yet, so we intended to get him incredibly drunk and, to put it frankly, get him laid. He was usually a shy, laid-back guy because it was one of the less expensive hotels we could find. We checked into the Carriage House Hotel. Given that our group size was 7 people, we were given to individual rooms. In the room where I was standing, there were 4 of us. We were joined in the room by Andrew. Since we were all very undernourished, eating naturally took precedence. After that, we went to the casinos merely to claim victory. Only one of the 7 of us managed to come out ahead financially compared to when we started. Things became murkier and funnier as the night progressed as we visited other bars. A rowdy nightclub welcomed us inside. Our pals John and Eddie were caught in the act of going out with girls. We got the lucky look when they shot us that. In an effort to get Andrew to approach a girl, the rest of us were exerting pressure. On him, however, he remained too timid to approach anyone or even dance, even when he was slightly inebriated. We were in such a rush to find Andrew a partner that we forgot about everything else. At this pace, we could immediately predict that he wouldn't encounter any females throughout the journey. After leaving the club, we set out to find a working female. You might find our behavior strange, but we were absolutely stoned as were most people at the time, while behaving like a moron. We approached a girl who was strolling alone and asked if she would be interested in spending time with our friend Andrew, who was obviously not nearly as wasted as us but still quite drunk. Even in my drunken state, I could have said that the girl wasn't very attractive, but we only wanted Andrew to enjoy himself. Her slightly deep voice made me look over at my companion, but I can't exactly place her exact words in answer to me. Additionally, I vaguely recall her examining Andrew thoroughly. Once again, I can't recall her exact words, but they resulted in her taking Andrew's arm and they began to stroll down the sidewalk. Observing Andrew's apparent discomfort, we couldn't help but giggle. However, none of us found the recent events particularly strange. However, we chose to follow closely behind them simply out of curiosity to witness what would happen. Neither of them spoke to the other. The girl almost seemed to be dragging him. Actually, we trailed behind for what seemed like 15 minutes. It might have been far longer. I honestly don't remember. The roadway had grown darker and more subdued. When they entered what seemed like an apartment complex, we couldn't help but giggle. On the other hand, we shared his immense joy and pride. We returned to the club because waiting would have been pointless. Our return to the hotel was scheduled for some time around 2 in the morning. Neither of the rooms had Andrew. My sobriety was improving, and I started to feel some worry. Upon hearing the news, John and Eddie, who had not been with us earlier, were taken aback. Everyone here figured Andrew was merely going out for the night with the girl. Nonetheless, Andrew never normally would have done something like this. So it was strange. After failing to reach him by phone, I attempted to contact him via text message. My pals reassured me to calm down since he never responded. Shortly after, I did not recover. A din accompanies my stride. I mistook it for an alarm and attempted to silence my phone by tapping on it. While my mind was still in sleep mode, I felt the phone start to ring as my consciousness started to settle back down. The number belonged to Andrew. For whatever reason, my heart rate dropped. The ringing had already roused my friends, so I informed them. The other end of the line was breathing heavily when I replied. There was Andrew, and he sounded like he was going through a panic attack. To ensure that everyone could hear, I placed him on speakerphone. While on the phone, Andrew started whispering. Even though most of it was unintelligible, we were able to decipher a portion of his speech. It was that lady. He whispered to us, "You all need to come over here." Immediately, we attempted to converse with him, but he remained unresponsive. The opposite party lost all sound. We were all practically yelling into the phone, inquiring about his well-being, his whereabouts, and the situation. Even then, I could feel my skin crawling with fear. However, the subsequent events only intensified the situation. On the opposite side, a sound pierced the stillness. Then comes Andrew's piercing, screams, followed by the sound of a forcefully open door. Prior to the call's last tone, we were all very mortified. I contacted the authorities while attempting to recall the location, if not the exact street name. I can't even recall the exact path we went last night because we were so disorganized. On the other hand, a buddy of mine said he did. We were accompanied by the police when they came to the motel. Apparently, my acquaintance could still pinpoint the exact location of the building. He led the officers away from the club and down the side streets until they reached the structure. 2 of the officers in the lead vehicle entered the building. There was another automobile for us to wait at. As I waited, filled with both hope and terror, the few minutes seemed like hours. A police officer emerged from the vehicle. In order to determine if Andrew was the rightful owner of the corpse, she approached us and invited us inside. When John and Jerry began to cry, it was as if the world had come crashing down around me. Despite their reluctance, I accompanied the officer into the building which, as it turned out, was everything but an apartment. Instead of a dimly lit, deserted warehouse, the lifeless form protruded from the partially open closet. The expressionless countenance, with its lifeless mouth agape and fixed on the ceiling. Even though it wasn't Andrew, it was terrible. I had an immediate intuition. The most striking difference between the 2 boys was that this one had blonde hair, while Andrew had black. The police had previously surveyed the entire area. Thus were at a loss as to what to do. I peeked into the closet where I suspected Andrew may be hiding. Under no circumstances. No way, not even on his mobile. We all tried to put it out of our minds, but I received another late-night call a little over a month after that. I retrieved it. Everyone was silent and unresponsive because to the poor reception. A muted but instantly recognizable voice asked, "Jesse," just as I was going to end the call, "Is that you, Andrew?" Out loud, I screamed. The last thing I heard before the phone ended was the distant sound of a door slamming. After I rang him 5 times, he still didn't answer. So what happened? In order to have the call traced, I contacted the authorities. It was absolutely not Nevada that was making the call. It was actually originating in New Jersey. Yes, our very own town, with a residence not far away. Even though they promised to send someone to the house, I still wasn't satisfied. For my own sake, I had to make the journey there. I got in my car, used my GPS to find the exact location, and drove at full speed for the entire 5 minutes it took to get there. On a corner was an empty house. In order to listen for any sounds coming from within, I crept up to the front door and placed my ear against it. Under no circumstances. Crawling around the rear, I discovered a window that was open. I paused to listen. Upstairs, you could make out the faint sound of snaps and cracks, the kind of noises made when a person stands or walks on wood. In my mind, he had to be in there. I sprinted inside, but I hadn't even started looking for anything when I noticed something at the end of the hall. I could barely make out a figure standing there, staring directly at me, their long black hair falling past their shoulders and pale. Bare legs were all that I could make out. There was a lady. I braced myself for the sickening sight of her rushing up to me like a monster from a horror film. But she just spun around and bolted in the other way. First, I heard a door bang. Then I heard stomping feet coming down the stairs. And finally, I heard a guy and a woman screaming. Now there was a sound of even heavier footfall pounding up the stairs. My instinct told me to bolt. I bolted from the home and hid in the woods. A mere 5 seconds after that, somebody emerged onto the porch, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, my luck looked to be finally in my favor as a police vehicle swung around the corner, beeping its horn. The man on the porch slammed the door behind him after muttering something. Once inside, the police arrived. Looks like that moron forgot to even shut the door. I remained concealed so as not to astonish the law enforcement and meet my untimely demise. I lingered outside near the vehicle, and a few minutes later, an officer emerged from the vehicle, handcuffed to the man. They never located the woman, despite my warnings that there was a woman in there and my introduction. Actually, she apparently escaped because one of the bedroom windows was wide open. Upstairs, Andrew was discovered confined to a closet. His long, unclean hair and terrible condition were symptoms of malnutrition. His aroma would waft over the distance. The man's records were run by the police. Since he had no marital history, they were utterly at a loss as to her identity. Claiming to have known her for only one day, he went to extreme lengths. At first, and even now, nothing has made sense. Andrew came clean about being raped, beaten, and severely malnourished. I just cannot see coming clean to someone about something like that. From his description, the female who had accompanied him to the facility was merely there to collect cash from the people. He called the operators. The fact that they were in our town was explained, but not really, because Andrew was coerced into giving them his hometown and the addresses of everyone else who was with him that night. For example, what they hoped to achieve, so they can murder us. They wanted to include us into their sex slave organization, right? I've just answered. I don't know what happened anytime someone has inquired about it, and I'm the only one in our group of friends who he's told. Just as things were looking up, I received a late-night text message from an unknown number that said, "Fuck you." This happened a few days later. I simply blocked whoever blocked me because I was unable to reply. The following week, it occurred once more, and then again a month later. Although I suspected it was related to the incident, I never imagined it would be escalated to such a point. Somewhat bright light was streaming into my room when I awoke one night. Through the drawn shutters, a faint glow of sunlight filtering in from the garden illuminated the room. That wasn't just any light. The light was from the back porch, in front of the blinds. I could make out the movement of a shadow. It was clear that someone was floating around, because the aperture at the base of the blind was too small to allow me good vision. I raised it just a hair. Someone appeared to be waiting for me by the window. They were staring directly at me. Nonetheless, I had no time to even consider taking a picture of them because they had already disappeared. That lady in the house is definitely the one, I think. After that, I didn't hear from anyone connected to this mess again. Even after hearing Andrew's most thorough explanation, I still don't understand a thing about this whole issue, since it is uninteresting. I don't see the sense in discussing Andrew's and everyone else's progress. All I can say is that I can't wait until my next encounter with these creatures and either confront them directly or contact the authorities if necessary.